Hey everybody, welcome to this week's Amplify Digest. I'm your host, Lars Schmidt, and as always, the Amplify Digest is supported by my friends at PIN, the digital communications tool for distributed workforces. Let's dig right in. All the articles I'm about to walk you through are going to be having links in the show notes, and we have a lot to cover, so we're going to jump right in. There's a couple pieces from HBR this week that are definitely worth your time. Here's a piece that is really an insightful piece around the changing narrative around mental health benefits at work, particularly a couple elements of modern mental health conversations, the expectations that organizations and HR teams are supporting employees in this way, but also intersectionality of things like diversity, equity, inclusion, and mental health. So definitely a good piece that's worth your time to help you have a better understanding of all things mental health today. The Great Attrition or the Great Attraction. This is another great report from McKinsey. And there's a lot of really good charts and data and research here, but this is one piece that really stood out to me. You know, if we're not understanding the internal catalysts that are causing our employees to leave and working to proactively address that, what is now a weakness could become a strength if we're smart about it. So there's lots of great intel, exit interviews and otherwise that we absolutely should be getting. What's really interesting in this McKinsey report is it talks about the number of employees who are quitting or thinking about quitting without another job in hand. And you can see these numbers are pretty significant. I found that pretty surprising. And so again, not all the employees that are leaving your business are leaving because they're unhappy with your business. Some are just ready for a change and it's the right time. And they're going to make that change whether another role is lined up or not. So interesting times. This is a great piece that gets into some questions around hybrid work constructs. And this is another thoughtful piece from HBR on the current state of learning and kind of where we're going wrong with learning and development. In this environment we're in now, particularly with the backdrop of the Great Resignation, upskilling and reskilling our teams is essential for retention. And so there's some good prompts in this piece to get you thinking about how to do that today. More data on employee sentiments around remote, hybrid, or co-located work. You can dig into the data on this report, but the more data we have in our back pocket as we're having some of these conversations, the better prepared we're going to be. So definitely worth a bookmark. This is an interesting piece on Apple's culture and some of the issues that they've been having lately. They had a culture that was really, known to be a culture of secrecy. They didn't really leak data. They didn't really have a lot of kind of employee upheaval, and that's beginning to change. And so this is a piece from The Verge that's really a deep look at some of the changes that are taking place within Apple's culture. This was an interesting piece from Leah Rolig about how to be thinking about agnostic pay. So again, for those of us that are either fully distributed or hybrid now, many of us are having the conversations, or we've already had conversations around how do we approach pay? Is it a uniform pay? Do we have pay bands? Do we base it by city? There's no necessarily right or wrong answer to any of those scenarios, and you can make compelling arguments for each, but Leah makes a compelling case around how we should be thinking about that in this particular piece. So definitely worth your time, particularly if you're going through these conversations internally. This is a meta post because you're watching this video, which is recorded but I'm a huge fan of what their CEO Phil is building. The culture at I know several people in the team, and they're really trying to build a company that is truly distributed first. And this piece gets into a new iOS app they launched called Ooh that allows you to have filters like this on a mobile device. But they also talk about how they actually give employees $800 per month to use however they want to kit out their remote working setup. So you want to buy a beanbag, you want to buy a new chair, you want to buy a poster for your wall, do it. Everybody gets the money. There's no receipts required. There's no questioning. They believe we hire adults. Let's empower them to make good decisions. And I like the leadership there. So this piece will give you a little more insight into that. Might be another data point if you're trying to make a similar case in your own organization. The challenge with hybrid right now, I think, is we're, moving companies that are going back in an office and they're trying to embrace these distributed first models, which is technically what you should be doing for parity's sake in an office, basically has employees beginning to feel like they're doing the same thing they were doing at home, but now they're having to commute to do it. So again, we're in this period where we're going to have some growing pains around hybrid and how this all looks, but this piece is a pretty thoughtful examination of some of the challenges as companies port some of those hybrid and distributed first practices back into an organization and an office environment. Smart recruiters, definitely recommend you check out this report. It's their 2021 State of Diversity Hiring Report. They made some big announcements last year when their Jerome Turnick, their CEO and founder, stated that smart recruiters will be an anti-racist force in the recruiting industry. That meant them gathering more of this types of data. So definitely worth your time to get a sense of where we are today and the progress that's still ahead. There's also an interesting alliance forming in this piece for companies around really pulling their resources and their ideas around destigmatizing mental health at work. There's a broader initiative, and these 4 companies are a part of it. It will be expanding, but an interesting way to see how companies are coming together to create some shared practices and standards around mental health support at work. And Culture Amp also has this thoughtful piece around looking at data-driven approaches to turnover. So again, all turnover is not equal. This piece helps you look at some of the numbers behind turnover to really understand what it means. And another great report from McKinsey on Women in the Workplace 2021. It's a sobering look at the impact of really the last 18 months, and certainly much longer than that when you talk about pay equity and access to opportunity. But there's some interesting data in here just around the impact of women in the workplace over the last several years, particularly the impact on women of color. And so this is a report I think all HR practitioners should be reading, should probably be bookmarking, and then should be recommitting themselves to narrowing some of these gaps and really working proactively to create more opportunities for women and women of color in their workplaces. A big fan of all things open source, as you know, and here's a great open source total rewards philosophy by remote.com. So if you're looking for inspiration, they just open source their report. Hat tip to them, and you can check this out and see how they're looking at it. Another great open source resource, it's a DIB source platform. It's actually an aggregate across a few different companies sharing DEI best practices and resources. So another one that's worth your bookmarking. And Katie Burke, one of my favorite chief people officers, CPO at HubSpot. This is a great podcast. There she gets into her career story and her career journey, and I'm a sucker for career stories. So if you want to get to know Katie a little bit better, which you should, give this one a listen. And one of the last pieces to get into in these new remote, in particular environments, having our employees connect to our vision and mission has never been more important. And so this piece by HBR gets into some of the disconnects that happen and how to address that to really create less gaps between the mission, vision, and values of an organization and your employees. And the last thing I want to cover this week is just a little cool thing that I saw that Shopify did, is creating a game for employees, a browser-based game where people can get together. It's just another way to build kind of connections and culture, for lack of a better word, but it's a whimsical thing. It's not really a culture building thing, but I think when you're a company that actually puts a priority on building some of these tools to bring employees together and have fun, that does speak to your culture. And so it's an interesting Twitter thread that you can learn about that game. And that is a wrap for this week. So thanks so much for tuning in. Be back with more resources next week. And in the meantime, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and I'll see you next week.